We're going to talk about the reality of Mitsurugi for 2026. So make sure you guys smash the little crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out more awesome content. So we're going to talk about Blazing Dominion and what in the world has happened to this so-called Mitsurugi support that we were all kind of expecting. Now, most of the January sets that we have followed the pattern for in Japan usually give us support based on, TCG exclusives. I mean, even Mimigol got a card in the set, but Mitsurugi is nowhere to be seen in this this whole little shenanigans. Now, this is kind of interesting because if we're not producing more Mitsurugi support, and yet Japan made Demise, which, by the way, Demise allows you access to Mitsurugi Ritual number 3's effect, which is you use either of the effects that you want. That's been the ruling on the card in Japan. That's why Japan plays it. Also, you can banish the ritual from the deck, which gives you access to pulling it back with the, the Kusanagi. It's the black one that has the ability to recur back with the effects. So, something interesting to kind of take away with this, people, is no Mitsurugi support flips us to a very interesting topic of discussion for the TCG Legendary decks. Now, it was kind of hinted at in the way that the wording was in the document that we might be seeing TCG exclusive support for Mitsurugi. Now, this would be truly the first time ever that the TCG would be creating what would be a Wave 3 of support. Now, the thing is, the way that archetypes have existed, it's been, we'll get 1 to 2, we'll get 2 waves of support, and then Japan has to be the one to do the heavy lifting to bring these archetypes into the spotlight. Well, Amino Murakumo and friends, this was the first time that we made 2 waves of support, and we made the deck increasingly broken. We've had decks in the past that, were functional. I mean, look at Gold Pride, for example, with Punk. It was functional and it was playable, but it wasn't at the point that it was game-breaking. No, it was weird, to say the least. So the whole debate of this is if the TCG is going to create a Wave 3 of support, or are we going to port the Demise in ahead of schedule? So if we were to port the Demise in to the Legendary deck for Mitsurugi, that would fix most of this discussion, actually, because then we'd bring the deck up to speed a little bit ahead of schedule. But then that would break the theme of these new support cards that are supposed to, well, they exist for the Legendary boxes to be able to try to do things. If we're taking one of them away and we're porting it into a deck to try to sell Mitsurugi, that doesn't necessarily work. So this is where we reapproach the original concept idea. This would also work with the idea of Japan getting these Mitsurugi cards at some other point, whether or not, I would assume it would be in the World Premiere Pack, would be the place that they'd port them, whether that be after Worlds. So you've also got the whole debate right now of, Konami wants to push Mitsurugi as one of the best decks for the World Championship this year. You want this deck to be one of the main challengers and one of the main highlights. And honestly, it's kind of crazy that it will be roughly 2 years by the time the Worlds rolls around this year. About 2 years. Because you gotta remember, the TCG had Mitsurugi about half a year to a year earlier than the OCG did. So, creative support. What do we do for this deck? You've already created all 3 of the rituals. And honestly, the community is so sick of this deck. The thought of giving it more is crazy. So there's a couple things you can do. You could create something for the extra deck for it to be able to use. You could create token generation for it. Creating token generation would allow, technically, Konami to sell you tokens for the package, which, isn't necessarily a terrible idea, because by Konami giving you tokens to sell the set, that would get people a little bit more excited, and they'd be like, oh, hey, I could, I could buy this deck. I get nicer little options available, but I don't feel like that's the place that Konami wants to take this. At most, it feels like Konami wants to approach this as an opportunity to just get Mitsurugi into everybody's hands. There's still the question of, what cards are going to fall around it like dominoes. Everybody has wanted, go directly after the deck, check this, but you can't really go after the deck. And that's the other thing too. Konami has to have the foresight to print this product 5-6 months in advance. So whatever cards that they put into this deck are not going to be cards that can actually be checked on any sort of ban list dominoes that fall around it. And that's the crazy part. You have to have foresight that far in advance when you're constructing this product, or, a lot of people are going to be upset. And that's what's happening right now. Players are upset because, Mitsurugi has drug its feet across the floor for as long as it has. We can, and this is where, there's an interchangeable agreement that can happen, we can still have this deck be a good deck. Nobody's going to argue that, Mitsurugi can be a good deck. The problem is when you're allowing a deck to kind of run into the room, and you're allowing it to do all of these crazy interchangeable pieces, when the deck becomes comboed up with other tier 1 packages. And that's why, you've seen Konami already take those hits where they're like, hey, rank 4s are abusing this. We have to take this away because, unfortunately, Mitsurugi is a rank 4 toolbox deck. It's able to take advantage of all of these little different pieces that it has, and it's able basically just to make a super board. And that's where more of our problem kind of comes in. So, no support for Mitsurugi right now. Tosses the ball right back into the TCG's court for what might be one of the craziest actions that we could see. Now, this also opens up the door, and I think this is one of the coolest things to kind of think about here. TCG could do this for very many future archetypes, or past archetypes too. You guys remember Vidos and Friends. Tistina could also get... The TCG we can go all the way back to Cosmo, for example. And I like this marketing. I do. I like that Konami can take already existing themes and print more support for them in a product, and then sell that product to us as the ability to get these cards. This is the way that Konami should have been doing this. Now, will this dilute and affect future sales? I don't think so. I think if they were to make another legendary deck and they were to put Vidos and Friends in it as one of the 3 decks and advertised it with new TCG exclusives that make the deck competitive, I think people would probably buy the product based on that, but they would also buy the product based on the other, themes that are going to be around it. It really, this sets an interesting stage for how Konami can future market things for the next couple of years. And I think, they need to not be afraid to give decks more than 2 waves of support. This is why these decks have been struggling for so long. And that's why, Tistina, Vidos, these decks for the last year or so felt so bad. And that's why they had to print such a generic card like Chaotic Elements to try to make these decks more viable, and why they kind of initially just fell off. It's just, you held back the best support for last, which just caused so many inconsistencies with things. So, going forward here, I think we are onto something. So, what support do you want to see Mitsurugi get here? Because I don't really know what they can do. Like, I've been thinking about this for the last couple weeks, because this hasn't been, we just kind of had a feeling we weren't going to see any support for it in the set. But the more that this has gone on, I really don't know what we can do, man. I'm mesmerized. So, I don't know. I'm sure it'll be broken. So what do you guys think? Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.